Max Wardell, overheadathletics.com. Today we're talking about anterolisthesis. I'm going to have Chuck back in for this video. You've seen Chuck in a few of our videos in the past. We did a hip video with him where we worked on throwing following hip surgery. We actually did some videos with him regarding our UCL series, our Tommy John series, where we talked about UCL tears in our non-op and post-op cases. Went through a 5-part series with him. He's coming back because he actually has an anterolisthesis in his lumbar spine at L4, L5, and he's got some modic changes, some end point changes, and we're going to actually go through a progression in terms of exercise for the anterolisthesis. We want to start to train the core and the back muscles to stabilize the segments to the greatest extent possible. What we have here is a spine model. Anterolisthesis, as you can see in this image on the screen, is a slippage forward of one vertebral segment on another. So let's imagine that in this case L4 slipped forward on L5, and we have actually a slippage. There's actually a slip forward of this segment relative to the caudal segment or the inferior segment, and generally when that happens it's a result of a pars interarticularis fracture, so a pars fracture, the Scotty dog fracture. When we look at the MRI, we look at the x-ray, we can see the Scotty dog on the plain film, and it's a fracture right through the pars interarticularis here, sometimes on both sides. With Chuck, he does have a pars defect. It's probably chronic in nature because he's been dealing with this condition for a while, and he's got some serious disc breakdown, a little bit of bulging that's compressing a nerve root, which is basically what you can see right here. Nerve root, disc bulge on this model. So what are we going to do in this case? We're not going to be able to fix, we can't fix the lumbar spine. What's damaged is damaged. We're not going to reset it back into place, not possible, except for with internal fixation surgery where they actually do a fusion. What we're going to do is work on exercise so we can better stabilize the core three-dimensionally and potentially offload this segment that's taking too much of the load. Because what happens here is that let's say we have one loose segment, L4, L5 in Chuck's case, but one segment moves. In this case, we're going to move a little higher up there, L3. One segment in L2, one segment or two segments are moving while the rest are not moving as much because it takes less force to move those. They're more mobile, they're hypermobile, so they're going to take the majority of the load, the majority of the movement. So then what do we have to do? We have to teach the rest of the spine to stabilize and have good core contraction. So as an athlete, as Chuck's an athlete, and he wants to be able to do athletic things, be able to throw, be able to do these things, he has to have better system control. Because if we look at anatomy the way you see it in a textbook, you'll see that it's all about that one segment. But in reality, there's so many fascial lines, connections from different ligamentous attachment, different soft tissue attachment, muscles, that if you can develop stability or some contraction, co-contraction, coordination through all those other muscles that can tension the fascial lines, can tension the ligaments, you can better stabilize that segment with just better motor control. So better control of those segments. That's essentially what we're doing because we have this biotensegrity, and you can look into videos or do some research on that. But if you tension one component, you're going to stabilize and put tension through other components. And it's a system that works in that way. And maybe we'll put a video up on that if you guys want to see it. But let's go ahead. We'll go into some exercise with Chuck to work on core stabilization, hip flexibility, things that are going to allow him to protect his back. So we like to look at hip motion really quick. Anytime we have back issues, we're going to have Chuck go through the modified Thomas test. Let's bring one knee to the chest. We're going to go back. And if we see a big gap between a table here, you can do this on a countertop, whatever, or this leg kicked out like Chuck's is, that tells us we have hip flexor tightness, the iliopsoas, rectus femoris tightness down through the quadricep. And really what we should see is flush on the table. This should hang right vertical with gravity, and we don't see that. So he's definitely tight, so we're going to work on some stretching here. Okay, switch. Same thing. Tight, but maybe not as much. Definitely inflexible. And then go ahead and scoot up for me there, Chuck. We like to look at hamstring flexibility and hip motion. So we'll go straight legs out, and then you're going to do a straight leg lift. Go ahead and go up. Good, and he gets to 90 degrees. We like him to keep this leg down. 80 to 90 degrees we'll probably say is acceptable, although we'd like it to be at least 90. And Chuck's fairly flexible through his hamstring. Got to be careful here because sometimes you'll get a false positive in that Maybe he has sciatic nerve tension from the low back. So if he does, it may look like he's got less hamstring flexibility than what he does have. Then I always take him through and just do a nice little assessment. You see Chuck does not have internal rotation of his hip. And he doesn't have great external rotation on that side either. And that's going to come into play, and we may work on that in a future video. But I like to assess these things because then now we know we're going to have to stretch the hips, and then we can work on some core stabilization, which is really what I want to focus on in this video. But I'm also going to show you how Chuck can start to stretch the anterior portion of his hips, which are restricted in his case. We're not going to focus on the internal rotation yet because that requires a little bit more in-depth assessment when it comes to the hip joint, arthritis, incongruity from cam lesions, or whatever it may be. So what we start with is just some table activities. Working into our on-table exercises, we're gonna have Chuck go into our dead bug progression. So this is just a hold. The knees can't go past the hips this way. Not past the hips, they gotta stay out this way. He's in a posterior tilt of his pelvis. We're gonna just have a hold 15, 20, 30 seconds. And then if he's having a hard time, we find that he's going into lordosis and lumbar extension, which is not good. Relax for a second, Chuck. Which is not good for a listhesis, because remember, and here's Chuck's MRI on the screen right now. If you look at his MRI, you'll see the slippage forward. You can see the modic change, or the change in the vertebral body, and the disc thinning as it's broken down, but you can certainly see how that segment is slipped forward on the other segment on Chuck's MRI. And what you'll also notice if you look at the MRIs of his hips is he has cam lesions. So no wonder why he has no internal rotation of his hip, and we can't actually rotate his hips well, because he's had deformities of his femoral neck and head. So what we have to do is really have to be specific with these exercises, make sure athletes are maintaining good core position. So I slide my hand under here. If there's a big gap, I'm going to ask him to crush my hand, and he's basically got to contract his core musculature, and I want to make sure he's not doing it with his hamstrings. He's got to basically round out and tuck under. So as opposed to being in this extended position, which exacerbates lesion of the disc that results in anterolisthesis, we actually have him tuck his butt underneath and hold that position. So we're going to have him tuck that position. Let's add some components to that dead bug, Chuck. So legs up. Let's add the arms first. So the arms can go there. Doesn't add a ton of load to the core, but it certainly does add load. Now we can hold the arms. We can start to do an easy march, one leg at a time. Nice and slow. Keep that posterior tilt harder, Chuck. Good. As he can maintain that, we can start to work into an elongated march position, keeping that same position. And we can go legs straight out. Don't let this knee come up too high. Good. Posterior tilt. Reach. Hold there. Now do it. Much more difficult. The lower the legs, the harder it is. Now I can have him do a few reps, alternating arm and leg. And you can see Chuck's got a lot of core instability and weakness here. Keep that crunch. Posterior tilt. I can't reach my hand under there. Good. Don't let the knees come up too high. Don't let him touch my hand. The higher the knees go up, he shortens it. Too much. Good. Once you can do 8 reps here, bilaterally, maybe 2 sets of that, then we can start to move on to some of our core stabilization and co-contraction forms of exercise. We're going to grab our aqua ball here, which is filled with water. It's rather unstable. So what we're going to have him do is butt kind of on here. We take the lower body out of it to start, and he's just going to do punches forward, which is going to load the back extensor muscles. The more forward he flexes, the more they work. And then we're going to have him start working on angles. So now the water's in here, just punching forward. If that's too difficult for him, hold it at the end, hold it, punch and hold. If that's too difficult for him, just a couple seconds, chest up tall, butt tucked under, good, go. And if this is difficult, we have him sit more upright. It's gonna be easier here. So that's how you scale it. Now bend forward, get out to here. Much more difficult on the back extensor musculature. Now we can start to work multifidi, rotators, all these things by punching them on an angle. Hold it. Good. The more he flexes, the worse. The worse in the upper spine. But I want him flexed in the lumbar spine. Go here. The more that he flexes forward at the waist, the more difficult the exercise. Let's go that way for a few reps. See how he's flexing? He's losing his stability. Chest out. Thoracic extension. Good. Thoracic extension. And now we're starting to get a good idea. Cam lesion, a lot of core instability, a lot of hip flexor tightness. We're starting to get a great idea of why he tore the disc up and ended up with a pars defect and an anterolisthesis to start with. It's all about core stability, all about hip motion or hip flexibility, and it's all about how the systems work together to coordinate into contraction. So we like to do that, then we'll have him go up onto one leg. We're gonna do some rotational punches up and across. If you've noticed, I've put him in a flexed position of the hips in each one, which allows him to access more of a posterior tilt. If he ends up going too far back and extending to get up there, like this, I just have him punch forward more. Good. That's going to work more back musculature as opposed to anterior core musculature, but still very effective. Then we can once again progress that to more anterior core, so butt is on the table, he's going to lean back, but he's still in a posterior tilt, and then he's going to give us those 3 ways there. So I can even combine these 1, 2, 3. Lean, 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 lean. Still in relative flexion or posterior tilt. Now go on an angle and hold. Much more difficult. Now go on that angle and hold. Good. Chest out tall, Chuck. Over here. Over here. Good. This is one of the best ones for the anterior core to start with. Once we've kind of hit our core coordination and our core magnitude exercises, we can start to move into some anti-rotation exercises. We can get our heavy band, and Chuck's going to do his payloft presses in an athletic stance with a posterior pelvic tilt. Once again, that tilt of the pelvis underneath, boom, turning that butt under, is going to actually protect that injury in the lumbar spine. We can increase speed as he becomes better tolerant. So you can go hold, 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 back in. And then as he becomes more tolerant of anti-rotation exercise, he can go faster. In and out fast. Boom. Once again, this is going to train more coordination and co-contraction of those muscles. Keeping that posterior tilt. Turned on. Let's turn the other way. Nice and slow. Good. Nice. Beautiful. So there's a great demonstration of what our exercise progression will look like. And I know I'm already going to get 500 comments saying, how do we progress this, or how do we schedule this in our training? How many times a week? How many reps? Guys, it's very individual. It depends on how you tolerate it. As you tolerate it, increase your speed. And if you're doing it for the first time, try one set of a few reps. If you do okay with that, still feels okay, do a few more reps the next time. Do another set the next time. That's how you have to progress it. It's not number of sets and reps like we often get confused with. It's more so about how many can I do without exacerbating any low back symptoms and without getting super sore through my core musculature. Once I can do that, hey, I did 2 sets. Now I'm going to do 3 next time. Then I'm going to add a little bit of speed. That's your progression. That's how we're going to do it. And if you can go beyond that, you're probably to the point where you need more advanced exercise. I'm going to have Chuck go into our favorite anterior hip stretch, iliopsoas and rectus femoris. We've got our jump stretch band here. Our rogue band is going to go up in the gluteal fold, right underneath the glute, as high up as he can. He's going to get his knee all the way up to the wall, and you'll see all of a sudden. Once again, what's the most important thing? The posterior pelvic tilt. So he's going to tilt his butt under, keep relative flexion here. Going to squeeze your glute. Good. Let's say Chuck can do that. You think you can get your foot up yet? What we don't want is this big extension moment through the spine. That's going to exacerbate an anterolisthesis. That's kind of our goal for him with this, and he can hit both. And the nice thing about the band is it hits that hip into extension. And let's see that other side for demonstration purposes. He's got a chair for extra balance. He hits that hip into extension, which is really going to hit that iliopsoas component as well. Yep, so get yourself set up, get that pad backed up so you can get your knee all the way up to the wall. So the knee goes all the way to the wall. Let's show him that first position one more time. So knee to the wall. He's going to stay down here to start. He can even go on his elbows if he needs. and he's gonna drive his hip forward, squeezing his glute. So it's pulling that hip. Now, as he tolerates, he can work that leg up and work through that whole progression that you just saw there. So that's kind of our progression for the initial stages with an athlete who has anterolisthesis. You're gonna wanna check out the hips a little bit more than what we did. We already know Chuck has some messed up hips that we're gonna have to work through. He's had surgery on one of them. The other one's a little bit messed up. The back is really his primary issue here, and you can see why. Tight hips, no rotation, maybe not able to improve that rotation so much, but we can certainly improve the hip extension component. We can certainly improve his ability to posterior tilt, his core contraction magnitude, or the magnitude of force that he can produce through the core musculature, as well as start to coordinate that a little better. You saw how difficult those exercises were for him. No wonder why he's got this listhesis. But over time, with exercise intervention, with some stretching of the hip, multiple days a week, we're going to be able to make some really nice gains, especially in a young athletic person like Charles. When you're doing the stretch, and I talked about dosing, I talked about, hey, you don't want to do 500 reps the first day or 3 sets of 10 when maybe your body can only tolerate 1 set of 5 to start. So start low, build up. With the stretch, what I recommend, as long as you can keep that good position of the low back, I recommend you hit 2 minutes per day, whether you break that up into 4 sets of 30 seconds per side, 2 sets of 1 minute, 1 set of 2 minutes every single day, so you accumulate 14 minutes during the stretch per week, which is what we've really seen is kind of more optimal for increasing flexibility. If you start to go under the 10 minutes per week mark, you're not going to see as great of gains in range of motion as you will when you're closer to that 15 to 20 minutes per week per muscle mark. These are some things to try out with anterolisthesis. We can come back with some more videos on these things. You guys have to let us know in the comments section. So if you have any questions, let me know below. Otherwise, I hope you guys will subscribe to the channel. Stick around because we're going to have a lot of videos coming out on core exercise, on manual therapy, a bunch of different things, as well as more sport-specific stuff that you're not going to want to miss. We'll see you guys in those videos.